extracting the chips.
All right, so everyone, welcome to this latest ACJR Off the Record, On the Record webinar. This one is about comms in crypto. My name is Molly Jane. I'm on the ACJR board, one of the original co-founders, and we have with us a very great panel. We have Sarah, we have Phil, and we have Saad. And they're all going to be discussing, thank you, they're all going to be discussing their different roles in the industry and how we can best communicate. Before we start, I'll do a quick plug. If you are not a member of the ACJR, you can message myself, you can message Joyce. Membership is inexpensive and it gets you access to special Telegram groups, membership benefits, perks, etc. Anyway, I'm going to mute myself and you guys can take it away.
Great, I can get started. My name is Sarah Ikalowicz. I work with KCDPR. We're a boutique firm based in San Diego, but we are virtual. We're everywhere. I'm personally based in Charlotte, North Carolina. We focus mainly on fintech and Web3 marketing firms. So we, have traveled around to various fintech, crypto, and other events, and have various clients. I got into PR kind of post-pandemic. I have a background in teaching. I also have a background in events. So it kind of combined two of my prior loves into one really great, new future for myself. So been enjoying it very much, really like the space and really excited to talk to everybody.
So Bill wants to schedule something.
Yep. All right, everybody go. Rock, paper, scissors for next.
You go. I'll let you go.
Okay. All right. My name is Phil Gomes, Chief Communications and Marketing Officer at Bloq. All things infrastructure and applications for Web3, DeFi, mining, metaverse, et cetera, et cetera. Glad to be here, coming at you live from Brazil, which is where I live now. But I was previously in Chicago for about 17 years working at Edelman. Started the Blockchain Center of Excellence there. Prior to that, I was 10 years in Silicon Valley, and then somewhere in between, I was 17 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days in Los Angeles. So great to be here.
Great. And I'm Saad. I'm a director for Yap Global, based in London. So Yap Global is a crypto-focused PR agency, primarily media relations, but we also do kind of owned content as well. My background initially was in traditional B2B tech PR, but I've been following crypto for many years now, and just the call of crypto was way too loud. So yeah, I'm so glad I made the transition. It's just a far more exciting life, let's just say that.
So this is Joyce Hanson. I'm the community manager for ACJR, and I thank you all for being here today. And the way these conversations go is we ask each of our panelists to kind of give us a roundup of where they think comms right now in crypto is going. And then we open it up for questions to all of our participants. If you have questions, put them in the chat as well. And we will make sure that your questions are answered. We also got a lot of questions from the participants who registered, and we'll try to catch those too. But we like to start with having our panelists just tell us what you think the state of comms in crypto is right now.
I'll start, I guess. It's this is now the third web epoch that I've gone through, and I think it's important to look at what has changed and what has stayed the same, and what has stayed the same, particularly, and everybody likes to say crypto's still early, right? 15 years in, crypto's still early. A sentiment that I absolutely positively believe and support. Could discuss that another time. But what strikes me is that there is still that, even though you have booms and busts, et cetera, there's still that high twitch, very nervous energy, but also the sense that despite the SBFs and so on and so forth, that everybody's really doing something important, right? I mean, everybody felt that way during Web 1.0. Everybody felt that way during Web 2.0. What's different And just in terms of the whole tonality of what I see is that I like to joke that before, money was merely involved, right? Everybody says, well, venture capitalists have, helicoptered money to, crypto startups. Well, they've always been helicoptering money, frankly. Oh, there's a lot of, publications that have boomed and bust, but we've always had that. The issue is that before, money was merely involved, right? And now we're talking about money itself. That changes everything. That changes the tenor, the sense of urgency, probably the volume, I imagine, that reporters on this call are probably experiencing in their inbox. But it also creates, I think, unique challenges because, of course, whenever money is involved, suspicion of motive arises, right? So I think that's part of the challenge now is that, particularly if you're talking to reporters and editors who are similar, have similar levels of experience, they've seen it all before as well. And again, now that we're talking about money itself, suspicion of motive rises, and therefore the challenge to people in our trade is to build stories and reputation that is credible, that is insightful, and then rises and developing content that, frankly, you're going to hate me for saying this, rises to the level of journalistic quality, rises to the level of education quality, informational quality, and on our best days, entertainment quality. And I think that's what's changing as well. I will say, finally, that, and I just want to staple this to everybody's forehead, despite what you see in your inbox, communications and public relations is not just media relations. In fact, media relations is becoming increasingly less of what a communications professional is doing these days. But nevertheless, that is cold comfort to your inbox. And, I imagine that, I do like to sort of land on the point that, again, the challenge that we all have is how to be not just relevant day to day, but sustainably relevant in terms of the clients and companies that we represent. So,
yeah, I just like to pick up on Phil, your point around reporters and this issue of like having seen it all before, because I think personally, from my perspective, where we are right now is that people, or maybe as a comms professional cohort, like we aren't thinking deep enough in terms of positioning, particularly and when I say positioning, I mean kind of defining what kind of narrative space, like a project that you might work with, where it lives, who they are, why they matter, how they're better than competitors. I think there's a bit of a lack of that because sometimes the narratives in crypto particularly and Web3 are very, very clear, and it's just like very easy to fall into these like, oh yeah, it's the DeFi project that does blah, that but it's on Cardano or whatever, but so getting to the heart of building a good comms plan kind of starts with having a good positioning. And if you can clarify what your positioning is, that's when as comms people, your pitches will get listened to, journalists are going to be interested in that, and yeah, that's how you're going to cut through, because we're still, even though we are in a bear market, this is still somewhat of a crowded marketplace, and having like a clear position is really, really helpful, and I think that's what we kind of need to focus on.
Yeah, and having a clear positioning moves beyond just positioning your own company. I think we've moved past the point of having to tiptoe around, kind of bad or negative stories that happen. We're in the era of SBF's trial starts next week. We know that there are bad actors. We know that there are, people who have taken advantage of situations. We can't just say, oh, well, and kind of tiptoe around it. Being able to position yourself separately and use your knowledge within your company and your space, and being able to say yes and share your opinion and share, kind of weave in what you and your company can do differently or what other companies can differently is extremely important. So, it's not just that, everyone has to play nice together all the time anymore. It's about making sure that you stand out from those that are maybe giving this space not a great name.
So one of the questions that comes up a lot is, gee, I put together this plan. I've talked to my, founder. We have a great story to tell, but it's not getting through to our investors. It's not getting through to our, to the writers, to the editors. What would you say to someone who is in this space, who may not have a very deep background in communications, about how they should tackle the problem of, I can't break through, or my messaging is kind of mushy. So how do people refine that messaging in order to reach their audience and be heard?
Yeah, I think just starting just from knowing your audience and keenly understanding who each stakeholder you're trying to speak to is going to be key, and then tailoring, whatever messages that you have for each group. Sometimes, you might be speaking to like a general crypto audience. So, it's about making sure that, a brand or the project is credible, and, there's like community engagement. That could be done through media relations and social media and things like that. I work with a lot of projects and they want to talk to blockchain developers. So, that's kind of tricky, because you have to really highlight the innovative aspects of their particular solution, and, technical robustness, and, developer blogs and things like that, webinars, whether it's like, VCs or a non-crypto native audience, but just understanding who you're trying to speak to and simplifying that core message, I think, is really important.
Yeah. And I think it's important too, especially as a newcomer, to not get caught up in the jargon. You never know kind of if you're using it correctly or not. And, at the end of the day, a lot of the folks who are writing for these audiences are not writing for the super uber professional who uses these in their everyday vernacular. A lot of the people who are reading about these projects want to learn about them. So bringing them back down to earth is extremely important as well, and kind of connecting them with aspects that maybe connect better to the financial understandings that folks have inherently or have already established.
And that's very similar to the point that I was about to make, because I will say that founder expectation management is incredibly challenging in crypto.
Yeah.
More so than virtually any other industry or technological epic I've been a part of. And again, could we trace it back to the money itself thesis? Maybe. But founder expectation management. If I had to divide, successful communications people from the less successful ones, if you assume generously, if you assume equal facility with media relations, content development, speaker placement, all that jazz, what makes superb counselors actually rise to the top is the degree to which they are able to manage expectations from the founders and leadership of their project. Because they come in, these founders, I mean, this is, they work 20-hour days, that, this is their project, this is their baby. They gave up the certainty of 401k or whatever the global equivalent is here. They gave up all of that certainty for this project because they're passionate about it. They believe in it. And very often, too often, these founders will expect that the person in the marketing and PR job is a kind of a cheerleader, right? In a way that's like, yeah, I know, I believe in it just as much as you do. And that's great when that happens. But the reality is, there are people who are of a service mindset and there are people who are of an influence mindset, right? People of a service mindset say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, right away, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. whereas somebody with an influence mindset is saying, okay, if you want to achieve this goal over here, here are the levers that you need to pull, and here is where comms and PR can help, right? Because this is to anybody, who's in this situation. The first thing I tell people to watch for is what I like to call strategy monomania, right? Or that one thing syndrome, right? Where I've had several clients in my past who were like, well, if we just get this coverage in the New York Times, all the floodgates are going to open, right? And then we're going to be, covered in resumes and invoices and POs and things like that, credit card receipts from our website, and it doesn't work that way. And a lot of the frustration I think that founders have, it's a conversation that happens well prior to discussion of messaging and who to reach out to and that sort of thing. It's just like, in the end, what is this going to get you by executing on this activity? But unfortunately, a lot of people just kind of fall off the result, and they look at, say, coverage in CoinDesk or Decrypt as the finish line rather than the starting gate, right?
Yeah.
And then they're disappointed, right? And that conversation early on is proper, and the ability to have that conversation is what separates good comms from bad comms before any comms related activity even starts happening. I just doused them.
So Sarah, do you have any comment on that? I think one of the issues that happens quite a bit in this space is that that comms people are not always at the table when it comes to putting together these plans. And how do you manage it? How do you manage?
A lot of the times we come in after the fact as well, or we come in after, you've fired an agency and we don't know why that you fired this agency. And, we don't know your expectations yet. We don't know what it is that you want us to do differently versus what they were doing, and so it's difficult. I think it's important to make sure that you provide yourself a seat at that table. And, especially when speaking to founders, if you're making this investment in public relations, you need to make sure that you're all the way in, and you can't just give us telephone versions of information and, expect us to be able to get you these fantastic results. We need to be there. We need to be in the room. We need to be able to sit and have discovery calls with your CEO, CFO, CCO, and all of the above, and be able to know really what is driving you. What is the purpose for this coverage? What is the purpose for, what's your end goal? Is it sales? Is it recognition? Is it to sell the company and then move on to something else? All of this is extremely important for how we're able to kind of successfully position and know where to go from there.
Yeah. And I think kind of the way that I think about it in my own head is like, I used to call myself like a PR person, but calling yourself a consultant really kind of gives you that ability to push back and try and understand or get across your view that not everything is newsworthy, not everything is going to be interesting. You might think certain thing is quite interesting, but this isn't really going to work from a PR and comms perspective. So yeah, thinking of myself as a consultant rather than just a PR person really helps with that.
Or a mediator or a mitigator of sorts, or, and sometimes we're even educators where, we need to kind of describe to the folks that we're working for what the public and the media are looking for. Just because you think that you have the best idea and product on the planet doesn't mean that it's going to translate that same way to everybody else.
And probably, related, the most unproductive conversations that can happen internally in an organization is one that goes something like, well, so-and-so got covered for this, right?
Yeah.
And, if you engage with the material beyond a 0 result control F and searching for your name, you find out that very quickly that's not the case, right? If somebody says that to me, I can say, this is, that is the result of a group that reads who they're trying to pitch, has a dramatic arc to their story, has invested in communications on a steady state basis rather than thinking they could just sort of turn it on and off like a light switch. All of those things are present, and it's, I don't know if anybody caught, like, it was about a year and a half ago, I forget what founder it was, but he blew up Twitter saying that there was like a media conspiracy against his startup. Do you guys remember that one?
Yeah, I do remember that. And I just cringed when I saw it. I was like, do not do that. Yeah.
I was just like, oh my God. But the guy thought that it was like some cabal of journalistic Sith lords sitting around the table trying to figure out how to destroy his business. And I was like, oh my God.
No one has anything better to do with their day or anything.
Right, exactly. But that surfaces dramatically a lot of the tension that happens between, a leadership team and a comms team. It's just that we got to see it out in public and got to chuckle at it a little bit. But
yeah, absolutely. And I think too, something that it's important to stress to founders and folks who are hiring us is that it's not all just earned media. That's not the only place that you get this coverage from or that you get this recognition from. You need to put some work into within your shared and owned media. I mean, the comparison that you're making is, well, so-and-so got covered by this outlet. Well, maybe they paid for that coverage. That's all a possibility as well. Maybe his brother went to high school with the guy, there's always these positions that could make anything that case, but it's not, you can't compare, to what other folks are receiving and getting coverage for. That's not how this works.
No, and that brings up one of the questions. We had some questions from our audience, kind of speaking of Twitter. Someone asked, what new methods of communicating with and pitching journalists have you noticed to be effective in the past couple years? Is email dead? Twitter DMs and Telegram groups seem to catch attention. Speaking panels and conferences seem to work well, but not every announcement can be made at an event. Curious to hear your thoughts on this. We're all spread very thin. And if we are to go into the CEO's office and say, I think this is the best way to approach our comms plan for this year, which tools are out there right now that might be the best place to put your effort into?
I can probably take the first part of that, which don't really focus too much on pitching, but I know from like the team and the people that I work with, I wouldn't sleep on LinkedIn as a medium to pitch. I know most of my work is done on Twitter and Telegram, but I know LinkedIn is a lot of people talking about how hard they're grinding and all that kind of stuff, but it's actually quite useful. I mean, there's have had some really good conversations, and we've landed some great opportunities for our clients on LinkedIn particularly, which is quite interesting actually.
Yeah, I look at it wasn't that long ago, like I'm saying maybe 5-6 years ago, where it's like, my God, you're gonna pitch a journalist on their Twitter DMs,
Yeah.
It's like, but now that is how one of our brands in particular, that's how they get the attention. A lot of the journalists that matter to them is they've been masters at getting in front of people that way. A lot of it is participating in the same circles as a lot of journalists. But I'll also say there is no substitute for, and this has been a problem in tech PR from the beginning, read their work. Read the work of the people you're going to pitch. I mean, this has been just a persistent issue. 90% of the pain that I think reporters have when it comes to PR people is coming from people who have not been properly trained, or if they've been trained, they've been trained badly, or on the wrong, or trained using the wrong things. And the biggest issue is not something that can be taught. It is, you have to have a genuine interest in the material, in the ecosystem, that you're trying to influence. And it boggles the mind how much, and I wonder, it just feels like the most hellish existence to be a comms person in a field that you're not intellectually curious about or at all interested in. And that is another thing that separates it, is that somebody who's willing to connect the dots, because when you have your hand in it for that long, you can start to predict instinctively where a story is going to go and your place in it, right? And again, some people have that curiosity about them and some don't, but that's not something you can teach. I don't think you can teach.
And
You
crypto
have to do
is
your research.
Yeah.
Doing your homework is
Do
the
your
most
own
important thing you
research.
can do.
And crypto
I mean,
is not. It's sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
no, you're fine. Absolutely. I mean, knowing, and it's about knowing those individuals and reading their work and, kind of following them on the outlets that they utilize to express themselves. It's funny, the very first ACJR kind of panel that I sat in on was about like kind of how to pitch, and how every single journalist on the panel had different preferences of what they wanted. Molly loves her email. There are other people that are like, don't email me, my inbox is overwhelmed, and it's about listening to people when they're saying things like that. A lot of the times people will put that on profiles if you utilize, kind of a tool like Muckrack, or people will put it in their Twitter profile, like hit me on Signal, DM me, here's my email. It's about listening to what people prefer in general. And then it's not just that, but at the end of the day, like for PR people, we're asking someone to do us a favor. Like we can't just expect from them without having a relationship. Engage with people, pay attention to what's important to them, chat with them about things that you find interesting, share other articles. It's about kind of building and fostering relationships. It's not just about what can you do for me.
Well, I mean, taking it to a slight extreme, I remember I started blogging about PR in 2001. And why did I do that? It's because the number one complaint from journalists is people who pitch me don't read my work. And being a cocky 20-something, I decided, I said, I'm not only going to react to your work, I'm going to do it in public, proof positive that I read your work. And the journalists today that I know that now I'm dating myself decades later, that I know I could pick up the phone and call, that relationship started on the basis of me publicly, actively disagreeing with them.
Yeah. And it's a conversation, whether it's a positive or negative one, it's a conversation.
Right. And, everybody's all, very afraid to do that. But, and it's something you have to do carefully. I don't want everybody to go back to their boss and say, well, Phil says I should disagree with everybody. That's not what I'm saying. But that level of participation is what builds, credibility in this space. So.
Yeah, 100% agree. But I also do think like having relationships is obviously very, very important and something that we should all try and cultivate. But having a good story is going to really help. Like just as if a journalist or someone's your friend, that's not going to mean that they're going to cover something. Just having like a solid story, obviously easier said than done, but that's kind of extremely important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think too, kind of in this post-pandemic world, what I experience at least, people are so hungry to just interact in person. And, everybody's spent, all this time on Zoom and online and, going to for me personally, going to events has been the greatest way for me to connect with folks and kind of get to know them and what they're looking for, and how best to interact with them. I can't stress enough the importance of just going up and saying hello to somebody at an event if you recognize them from, their profile picture or their LinkedIn or Twitter or anything like that. I joke all the time that I could talk to a brick wall. I'll go up to anybody and say hello, what brought you here? And, some people, especially if they're newer to the space, that's what they need, make some friends, bring it out of people.
We have in the chat, we have someone saying that speaking of pitching, that they seem to have a very low conversion rate. Let's talk about conversion rate. We send messages out and we don't get answers, but that doesn't always mean that it hasn't been seen. I mean, would you agree with that? That maybe you aren't getting feedback, but it's still good to send it out?
So if somebody is being managed on an email to ink ratio, yeah, that wow. I hope that isn't an admission of what the workplace feels like. I mean, in terms of conversion rate, I mean, it comes down to a measurement question, doesn't it? And how do you measure this? And media relations has been a notoriously difficult thing to measure. When I was at Edelman, I was basically their de facto academic relations person. And I have literally sat down with dozens of PhD, double PhD'd academics. They haven't cracked this nut. We're not going to crack that nut on this call. Yeah, you can't manage what you can't measure, but perhaps the way to look at it isn't in a way that is similar to how you look at click-through rates in e-commerce or bounce rates or that sort of thing, right? I mean, it's a very, very different, very different way to look at it. And I have a lot of ideas about measurement, but I mean that strikes me as hitting the core of that question. Is that if that's how you're measuring it, that bakes disappointment into the into the operating system of what you're doing there.
So we had another comment in the chat, and this plays right into this conversation, Phil. If we can't compare coverages, how do we benchmark? And how, so that we're showing our founders that we are, that we are doing the job. And, what does a report back look like to someone? Okay, so I sent out 20 messages on LinkedIn and I DM'd 50 reporters 3 times about this announcement, and I have one person that responded. I mean, what type of how do you present, this is what I'm doing and this is my progress, to a founder who may just say, hey, listen, I'm still not in the New York Times? How do you show your value if we're not comparing coverages? What's my value? What did I do this month? Well, you got nothing done. You didn't get me what I needed. Tier 1 media.
Right. I'll answer that very, very quickly, which is to say that, you can mathematically look at it as, here's the competitive set that we're benchmarking against. Here's what kind of coverage they have, right? Here's what kind of share of voice they have. Let's see how, what are the strategies that we can make in order to, sort of elbow into that. I mean, that's the basics of it. But also when it comes to expectation management, again, to the earlier point, in my experience, and I'd love to hear Sarah and Saad's reaction to this. In my experience, if the expectation is demand generation, PR is terrible at that. If my goal is demand generation, there are so many other marketing levers that I can pull that can be more efficient, right? But especially in a B2B context, a buyer's, I think the latest number is something like a buyer's decision to purchase something is 90% made before they even pick up a phone or send an email, right? How do you get over that 10%? Well, that's when media relations comes in. That, very difficult to measure. And the only thing that you can measure then is sort of the secondaries that come at you, right? Which is, okay, if I'm Acme Widgets and I'm competing against Spacely Sprockets, right? How's Spacely Sprockets doing in the media versus me when they're mentioned? Is it positive or negative? That sort of thing. But
yeah, I mean, I completely agree. PR is so intangible. It's, based on these kind of amorphous things like reputation and what people feel about a brand, and yeah, just general feeling. Just putting hard and fast numbers on things like that it's extremely difficult. And yeah, as Phil says, it's kind of that 10% that isn't, that you can't quite put your finger on. That's kind of where we live.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too, because you can never control what's going on, kind of surrounding your own PR situation. Timing is everything. We've seen. I was doing a webinar with a client, and it was in the middle of the kind of whole FTX Binance blow up before everybody knew what was going on, and both of the folks that I was working with were sitting here like this, like staring at their phones, like watching all of this stuff blow up. And it's like both of them, I'm sure, are thinking, oh my god, like I need to get to my computer, I need to do all of this. But then, like, imagine being someone who's trying to pitch something else for your story while all of this is happening, and that's just within our own space as well. Then you have all of the other kind of everything else that could be happening in the world.
Right.
We had a question about AI tools. What do you find AI tools to be a valuable way to communicate, and which ones are you using?
Wow. Go ahead. I feel like I go off on these rants. Just go.
Communicate, no. Get things done, yes.
Yeah, I think that's exactly
Good
it.
point,
It's help. It's not gonna. It's not. Well, I don't use it for any kind of like public facing work. It just helps me organize my thinking and things like that. But I don't know if everyone else. Things like ChatGPT and other AI, it has a very specific tone that I can just tell a mile off now. It's only been like a few months or 6 months, but yeah, I just know immediately when something's been written by ChatGPT, and I think most people can as well. So just don't.
I have a weird relationship with it because for organizing thoughts, for summarizing items, I think it works pretty well. Very often for internal presentations, I'll use something like Stable Diffusion for images because I'm no graphic designer by any stretch. Sometimes I just need something very quick. But I will say, for things like, again, organizing one's thoughts, or it's been helpful for me in terms of outlining things, and then, I'll just sort of do the rest. I do resent the guardrails that a lot of these AI tools have. Like one, this is not at all serious, but I actually find it rather hilarious, is that I often play ChatGPT and Google Bard against one another. And one time I asked ChatGPT, write 5 paragraphs on the history of cryptocurrency as if you were impaired by LSD. And ChatGPT comes back with, drugs are bad, they're illegal, I will not be completing this assignment for you. It's like, okay, whatever. And I go to Google Bard with the same prompt, and it comes back with, dude, I'm tripping and the walls are melting, man. I was like, okay, Google Bard is inferior in a lot of ways, but on that particular score, in terms of not having as many silly guardrails around it, Google Bard absolutely won the day. But the tools are, the cliche running around, right, is, learn the technology or the technology is going to use you. The person, there's going to be people who are going to be, fired because they've been replaced by AI and they've been replaced by the person who's mastered AI. We've heard all of these things fly around Twitter and LinkedIn. I think the tools, have their use, but what I'm desperate for actually is, we're an engineering focused organization at Bloq. So we tend to very intentionally, kind of keep the marketing operation a bit thin on the ground. And so I would love something that helps take the heavy research lift out of the strategy process. So, for example, let's say I had an announcement to make and I said, okay, well, tell me the media that is most interested in my spacely sprockets, right? Give me that. Okay, now good PR planning is like, okay, who are the third-party experts that these reporters will tend to go to, right? Because sometimes actually, if you pay attention long enough, that's very predictable over time. If you read enough people's material. I want an AI that automates that process. Not at the strategy level. It's crazy to me that so many executives right now are so giddy about AI because they think they're going to save some money on blog posts. That strikes me as profoundly incremental thinking, right? Whereas what I'm desperate for is something where I give it the parameters and I say, based on what you see, who out there is writing about this topic, who is positive towards this topic versus negative, what is that share of voice? And then within that, who are people talking to in order to get expert commentary? We call them, KOLs, key opinion leaders. Who are the people in there that are nobody has this. And it seems like we've accomplished so much else with AI. Nobody's had this, but I'm actually desperate for a tool that uses AI for that, rather than, give me more blog posts or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep in mind too that we don't call AI tools AI solutions. We call them AI tools. They are there to help you do a job, but not to do it for you. Shovels make digging a hole a lot easier with the tool than doing it with your hand, but you're still putting in the effort at the end of the day.
Right.
It's still you are the effort behind
That's
that.
right.
So, that is, I think, the most important thing. It's a foundation. It's a basis. It's another tool that's going to help get the job done, a thesaurus. So like you have pieces that you add in to kind of get the job done well, but it is definitely not this end all be all. Yeah, exactly. You can feed a dog anyway. Does a bowl make it cleaner? Absolutely. You could do it on the floor. You could do it on a plate, but the bowl makes it a little easier.
Is it an end-to-end, robust, seamlessly integrated dog food bowl? That's all I want to know.
We want to make sure we get some of these questions in. This is an interesting one too. How many Web3 projects based out of Asia and specifically China, with many projects being based out of there, how do we navigate the cultural differences between the team and the global audience? And how do we effectively rally stakeholders toward the same goal? Once again, a lot of people on this call are wearing many hats in marketing. And this is one of the challenges that they're trying to navigate too. So any thoughts there, I think, would be appreciated as well.
I guess I probably don't have a huge amount of experience with this, but it sounds like, I think, just being able to clearly articulate a goal or a message that is universally understandable and relatable, that kind of transcends those cultural and linguistic barriers. Maybe that might be the easiest way of going about it. But yeah, because if you're trying to rally stakeholders toward the same goal, from different cultures, maybe try and take it that one step higher for something that, everyone can get behind rather, depending on where they are.
I do think it's vital too that, and I've seen situations like several times. This is I'm not so much now, but it was definitely a childhood disease among PR teams. Maybe about a decade ago. But this thought that you could have a truly global PR program without experienced native speakers on the ground and you don't see that as often these days, but it is still incredibly important. And somebody actually very recently complained to me the other day that they just kind of felt like so many things are like hatched in the United States and then like stuffed into a catapult and sent over the Pacific Ocean, and it just lands on people's desks. And it's just like, all right, what do I do with this? I don't know what to do here. Same with the Atlantic. It's like thud, and it's like, what do I do? And the classic example in marketing is when the story, which may or may not be apocryphal, of when Coca-Cola was entering the Chinese market, and somebody pointed out that Coca-Cola sounded a lot like bite the wax tadpole in Mandarin, right? So nobody thought of that before sending it over. On the other hand, I've seen examples of really interesting happy mistakes. Like I worked with a hard drive company called Cornus. They made small hard drives for MP3 players. And they started getting more than their fair share of meetings with device manufacturers. Like this was a nobody company in hard drives. And they were getting from all the sort of the second tier device manufacturers up and around Guangzhou in China, and they couldn't keep up. Well, it turned out there was a rumor going around that Cornus, like the architectural fixture, right? Cornus, there was a rumor going around that Cornus was a portmanteau for Corporation Nice. And everybody wanted to partner with them because they was like, oh, we want to partner with Corporation Nice over here. That's what was going around. So sometimes it works in your favor, rarely. But I think more often than not, people don't, we talk about decentralization a lot. It's an article of faith, in our business. But decentralization necessarily means geographical dispersion as well, if it's going to work. And that's true of technology. That's true of messaging. That's true of positioning. That's true of all of the above. But yeah.
Sarah, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the problem is you have to be as straightforward as possible, and without a lot of the fluff and the, like we've talked a little bit about some of these like pieces of campaigns that don't translate correctly. At the end of the day, a global need or desire or, kind of focus, it has to be able to touch aspects of every single one of those people's lives if it's going to be global. So, stepping back and keeping your goal, like, your goal and your vision as simple as possible is the best way to get that across the line. Keep the fluff out of it if that's truly what it's going to be. And then, you can have specific markets where you have, specific campaigns, but, doing that globally it's taking out a lot of what sometimes folks think make them special.
Yeah, and I think we just got a comment from one of our participants. In Asian countries like China, translation is not enough. We have to understand the cultural, even the social media platform is totally different from US platforms. If you don't have boots on the ground in your comms operation in Asia or another country, make sure you are testing and talking to people in your company, even if they're not in comms, to run by your concept to make sure that you don't make the fatal mistake like we did, which we put white tablecloths out for Chinese New Year. And of course, white tablecloths are the symbol of death, the color of death, funerals. And we had to whip everything out of there as soon as the first Chinese person walked in and said, no, you've got to make a change right now. So make sure you're talking to somebody, even if you don't have that organizational structure in the country where you are working.
I once gave a PowerPoint presentation that I myself created in China. And the map of China I showed, it did not include Taiwan. I was not invited back.
Yeah.
You know, I have a good friend actually. He's an ace, world-class graphic designer, and he spent a lot of time in Shanghai, and he got a client that wanted to do some kind of very elegant dinner, like a business dinner, you know, event for press and everybody. And he said, "Could you design the invite?" And so he designed it. It was very crisp, very, you know, it was all in simplified Chinese. And the person wrote back, the client wrote back and said, "No, more elegant, more elegant." So he made the characters more fine and everything, and the paper was the best stock. The client was still unhappy. He said, "More elegant, more elegant." Okay, fine. So now everything is very, very crisp, and you know, all the characters are perfect. And I was like, no, but when his client was saying more elegant, what the client was looking for were evidence that the brush strokes for the characters were like more like rough, right? And kind of, you know, that they looked like rough brush strokes rather than perfectly typeset characters. And it blew his mind. He goes, "I should have asked that question 2 weeks ago."
The translation
what do you mean by elegant? Because from his very very Western sensibility, elegant just meant, you know, very, very crisp presentation, and whereas that's not what the client was looking for at all.
Well, does anybody have any thoughts to wrap up here? We did have one question about how to get started in PR, but that's a whole nother webinar. We have to get. But I
myself came into this career by accident.
It happens to everybody.
I just tripped into it myself. So everybody has a weird origin story.
Yeah. Did you want to do the one about the crypto scams and whether the noise and misinformation is over?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So that go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, I mean,
don't be a scam in the end.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, I think the question was like whether the noise and misinformation and scams is finally over. And from my perspective, unfortunately, no, I don't think. For good and for bad, like crypto is open, permissionless technology, and that unfortunately means that, you know, anyone can launch a project, anyone can, you know, launch an NFT project, and that just means that, you know, some kind of nefarious people may still be around in some form or another. But I think we as comms people and journalists and, you know, everyone else involved in the industry, what we can do is, you know, uphold ethical standards and try and amplify, not cheerlead, sort of the good actors as much as possible. You know, I'll be honest, like I've been approached by projects who wanted to kind of sort of work together, but obviously, you know, a little bit of research and you know, they were obviously like not very they were kind of scammy projects, let's just say that. And, you know, we don't want to work with people like that. So
scams
I think
exist everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I mean, that happens. Look, people are still trying to steal other people's identities. Like, you know, I mean, it's happening. It's everywhere. You see it all the time. We get robocalls about, you know, student loans and, you know, whether you can refinance with someone or, you know, everywhere. As long as there's an outlet for someone to try and make money off of someone, they're going to be there. Which is unfortunate, but, you know, it's just about educating, you know, what the right ways to go about things. And it's, you know, with any other sense of internet security and safety and cybersecurity concerns. You know, I think that this one piece about I think we have shut up the crypto bros. I think we've defeated them. I think we can say that we've defeated that so far, which is good to see. You know, once you're being taken seriously by the Senate, I think you become pretty uncool.
Right. I kind of figured it was a small, if ironic, success metric when people were reporting fake Phil Gomeses on Telegram. I'm like, I'm important enough to be impersonated. Yes. You know?
Well, thanks so much. We're gonna have Molly come back here to wrap up for us. Molly.
Yes, I'm here turning my video on, putting my chips and salsa away. All right, so thank you guys for joining us for this webinar. I think this was probably the most questions we've ever had at a webinar. So congratulations to you all and to everyone who asked questions. I'll end by giving just another plug for the ACJR. If you're not a member, if you don't know what membership is and you want to find out, you can find Joyce or myself on Telegram or any other members of the board, and subscribe to our newsletter. The fall edition will come out soon, and I have to write it first, but anyway, thank you all very much.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Everybody, nice chat.